Hi, Simon.
Hey, Lisa.
How's it going?
Good.
That's not what I'm supposed to ask you.
Oh,
I was thinking about how I listened to this podcast with Scott Galloway. Do you know who that is?
I think you've shared some of his stuff with me.
So
Financial guy?
but also marketer, I would say, is really his strength and
Hmm.
brand.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's actually pretty, yeah, well, I don't even know what the right word is. Like he's got a very diverse background. But he is a marketing professor at NYU Business School, and he has started a bunch of different companies. He does give it like not investing advice, but he does have a podcast with this guy Ed Elson on the markets, and the episodes always start with Scott giving a terrible joke that in some cases are offensive to people. Like he actually tries to be provocative. He says that. And then Ed, who's I don't know, 25 years old or something like that. And then by the way, so Scott, he's announced that he had his big 60th birthday party. So there's an age difference there. And Ed will just sort of stare at him like, I don't understand that reference, or it's kind of funny. And then they'll go into a portion that Scott calls banter, which is what you and I will often do at the beginning. That's what we do. We chit chat a little bit. We get a little personal about stuff. And then, but it's funny. He literally calls it like, Ed, what's this banter? Like, give me some banter. Like he'll call it out specifically. It's very funny. And the last one that I was listening to, he got off on some topic that in this like banter section. And he all of a sudden he looks around and goes, Ed, get me out of this. Like he didn't know how to like start the podcast. Yeah, it was very funny. And
Are you
yeah, I
feeling that
feel
way right now?
a little bit. It was funny though. And so anyway, yeah. So Prof G Markets though, if you're interested in things financial and if you have a tolerance for somewhat provocative, it's very
Racy
informative. Yeah,
jokes
a little
and
bit. Yeah. So it's just in the
okay.
beginning, and that's why I haven't shared any of that with you. You're a
Well,
little bit
I
more
mean,
sensitive.
this is why we call this show. It's mostly marketing, right? Because
It's mostly marketing.
yeah, I mean that
So
was sort of
let's.
marketing for him, right?
Yeah, I am marketing him. That's true. I am
Yeah,
a big fan. It's funny.
yeah.
This other guy that I worked with when I was working first started consulting. I had started working with a marketer that got hired full time, and I was a part time person. And this guy who was 25 at the time, this is like I guess 6 years ago.
We were all
He and
25 at the
I
time.
at some point, no, 6 years ago, and he was telling me about Scott Galloway. He's the one that told me. He was like, "Oh my god, I love this guy." He's like he was like, "I'm such a fanboy" and all this stuff. And so I started following him back then, and he's got a very interesting background. So check him out. So you're right. This is a little bit of
Okay.
a marketing. It's an ad for Scott Galloway. Okay, but what are we talking about today?
Today I
Nothing to do
think
with anything that I just said at
no,
all.
not really, unfortunately.
That's okay. That's okay.
I think what we wanted to talk about today is that, um, people should be testing. We want to talk about marketing testing. We want to talk about testing is way better than guessing. I'm sure that all the podcasters out there do some sort of testing. We've all done testing, you and I, at various roles and things like that. And it sounds complicated when you say that. It's like, is there a laboratory and chemicals involved? And, do you have to precisely measure the ingredients and things like that? And the answer is no, it's not really that hard. I think with digital and with everything being tracked and things like that, it's much easier to figure out what works for your business.
Yeah, and if you don't have the ability to measure things, though, that I would say is a thing that might make it difficult. So that's why I think maybe for today we'll focus on the digital side of things because that's where it's easier to measure. Easier to set things up on the analytics side. So
And what's one of our taglines? Always be tracking.
always be tracking. No kidding. Always be measuring. Like seriously. I forget the order now. We gotta.
I mean,
What's the most important thing? I think it's like always be measuring. No, it's always be tracking. I think that was the first one. Like if you're not tracking it, you can't be measuring it. Anyway,
what are some of those things that you can test pretty easily, like just at a very high level? Like,
yeah. So I think of like different marketing digital marketing channels like email, and then within that, there's a ton of things you can test.
Hmm.
There's advertising, and then within that, there's a whole bunch of things.
Meaning digital advertising.
Digital advertising,
Right.
website. I guess you could do. We talked about this once about billboards. Like you can measure a billboard, but like it's a
Oof.
whole
But
other
then
thing.
we're not
I
in
know.
digital.
Let's forget about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's. I hope none of our people are doing. None of our listeners, viewers are doing billboards. Ugh, it's just return on
Actually,
investment is so
I do
bad.
know someone who just did a billboard, but I don't think it was
Why?
them. I think it was
Oh,
so
well,
our
you know
friend,
what? If
I'll
you,
just do a shout
yeah,
out to our friend Jay Middleton,
holla, yeah,
and he is
he had a
playing in
billboard.
Harrah's in Northern California in March.
Whoa.
I think
Well,
it's
he's
March.
not doing
Maybe
that.
it's May. March?
Wow.
I could be wrong. But Jay Middleton Band, and he has a billboard. So yeah,
Wow. That's exciting.
yeah.
Oh
So
my
anyway,
God.
that was a
Well, that's different. I feel like that's pretty good though in that particular context. So that's just about making awareness. So you're not measuring it, you're not testing it.
sure.
You're just throwing it out there,
You
getting
might be catching
exposure.
people who are just,
Yeah.
need a place to pull
They're like, oh,
off
that's
and,
cool.
I'll go listen to some blues and things like
Yeah.
that.
All right, we're already off track.
Jazz. Yeah, well, so we're also going to cover, so you talked about some of the channels. I think we want to talk about mistakes, how you can work around them, and then make sure that we give you something actionable to follow up with after you
Yeah.
listen.
Yeah. And, we probably don't have to get into the benefits of why to test, but actually we should probably, but maybe we do.
Well, I mean, I think what it lets you do is have decision based data based decisions, right? It's
Data
versus
driven.
data
Mhm.
driven.
It sounds like database, like a database, but
Oh,
yeah.
whoops, data based. Sorry,
based.
2 words.
Sure.
But there's definitely, I think we all go by our gut, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when you just need to start based on your
Well,
experience. But ultimately, your experience probably is impacted by things that you saw worked and didn't work, right?
so
But
the guess part, or gut part rather, I think that's fine for developing a hypothesis. It's kind of like, I think this, but I
mhm,
wouldn't say that you're testing that. That's more of
no,
just to help you with your hypothesis
right.
of, oh, I'm observing, such and such. Is it, I always do a bad job of like I got to think of an example. So let's say like, oh, we've noticed a decrease in sales. And what are the things, why? What are the things that happened? Did I make a change on my website? Did
Right.
did something happen in the world, or did prices go up somewhere else, or I don't know. So you have to try, you might start to wonder about stuff. And then that might be the reason that you go, oh, maybe I need to test this to see if my hypothesis is accurate or not.
Yeah. All I
So,
was saying is that when you initially launch a business, no matter what that business is, you probably launch it with your experience, right?
yeah,
You don't have anything
sure.
to test with, so you launch based on
Of
gut
course.
and experience. And then, but now that you have a business rolling, the goal is to optimize it, right? To make it better.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
best way to do that is test and use data.
Yep. Why don't we get into the types of things to test? So we touched on the some channels, and we will get into those into a little bit more detail. I do want to speak broadly about the types of things to test, and then we
Okay.
can go through the channels more specifically.
Sure.
You can test words, so content. You can test images. You can test the layout of something. So whether that's an email or a website or advertising, you test layout. And I guess with image, you also might have colors. Like there's other attributes that you might test. Functionality.
Oh, functionality. Yeah, that's a good
True.
one.
Functionality. And then one thing that is harder to test is like timing. So one of the things, like sometimes you might want to test sending something, like let's say it's an email. Is it better for me to send them on Tuesdays, or is it better for me to send on Thursdays? Is it better at 7 or at 8, or, so the timing is hard. And the other thing that I've struggled with, but I would love to do is like frequency. So do I send a series of 3 emails that are in sequential, once a week or something like that? Do I only send 2? Let's say you're promoting a webinar and it's like, what's the timing to lead up to that event? So it's a little bit trickier, but broadly. So you did say landing page. That's a good one.
Like destination. Yeah.
Yeah. Destination, like where you're driving people to.
Right.
That is actually a very good one.
And is there any other
what
big
other
ones,
things?
high level?
Those are the ones I can think of. And maybe as we're talking, we'll think
Well,
of
we
some
talked
other
about
ones.
images, but there's also elements, button color, how long your copy is on your button. If you're talking about digital, those are things that you test.
That's true.
I mean,
And then,
ultimately, I think you can get very specific, but the problem is that the more specific you get with testing, the more you have to have conversions, right? You have to be able to have solid conversions to measure.
Fair point. So in all of these cases, well, there's something. So maybe it's not a purchase, but maybe it is, I got somebody to
add to cart,
email, but maybe it's just a click. So maybe you're looking at the other side, which is better. I'm trying to get people to click on that button in order to do these things later. So a click might be what you're measuring. So we're getting a little.
I
bet
there's a big debate, and there's probably people out there who would disagree with us, because I feel like I'm more in your camp, because what data shows us today is that every time you add a click, you lose 30%. Like, that's just a sort of given. So if you make it 4 steps to say add something to cart,
you're
going
to
keep losing 30% of your clicks. Oh, sorry.
I see what you're saying. So I thought you were doing like in this version versus that version. The more people that click on this one, I'm losing people, and that didn't make sense to me.
Right, but if you're saying if the open rate is already a percentage, let's say the open rate is 40% or 20%
in an email.
So now you have just open. Now you want people to keep moving forward. The goal to me is to always be getting people to move forward in their journey, because some of the people are ready to convert and some are not ready. So the more you do to move them forward. So that's why I argue on your side about just measuring clicks.
It's every step of the way. So you do need. All right. So we're referencing a lot of episodes that we've already done, which one we went into a lot of detail about email specifically, and then also about attribution. So just to touch on that for a moment, but if we want to reference, that other episode. What you were talking, and about the funnel. So what you were talking about, it's kind of like, what are the things that we're doing to advance people to the next step? What we're talking about here is like in that individual tactic or touch point. We've used these terms before. I'm trying to improve those. Like let's say I have an email. I want to make that email the best email it can be. So I'm going to test different things.
Yep.
Or I have ads that are going to drive to the website, which is ultimately going to do other stuff later, but I still want that ad to be the best ad it can be. And so we're going to test it. So we'll reference our attribution. We'll reference funnel. There's a bunch of other episodes if you want to get into that part, but we're just talking about the tactic itself and how you can make that one better. And that is why you test, is to improve whatever it is you're measuring.
To devil's advocate is going to be, well, if you're just getting more people to click, but no one is purchasing still, that may be a problem.
Well, then the place that you're bringing them to, that's what you have to examine. So if you're getting people interested, it's like, okay, so that tactic did its job. Even if it was clickbait, for example, like that makes me crazy. It's like, ooh, find out the secrets of something. Please don't do this, anybody. But it's like, oh, I'm interested
Hollywood
in that.
couples that are still married after 10 years.
Right. So then,
or
so
6
it got
months.
you to click. And then it probably brings you to a page that has a bunch of ads. And so they're getting revenue from just the ads showing up. So you fell for it. But they still met their goal.
I was going to say, that's a good point. Like that, their goal, they don't care what happens after you click. No. Their goal is to drive click for ad revenue. So good point.
Exactly.
So why don't we talk a little bit more than specifically in the channels that you mentioned? Like what can we test? Like what should we test? What's simple to test? Or maybe email, it's which is easy and which is hard?
Let's start with email. And there's sometimes people just make a decision to say, I'm just going to send this this email for this purpose. And what you don't know necessarily is, so subject lines is what would cause somebody to actually open your email. I will caveat, and we've said this before, that open rates are falsely inflated because if people open an email, or sorry, if they receive an email on an iPhone, so specifically iOS, it will mark as opened. So they are artificially inflated. That said, it still can be looked at as trends over time. So just keep that in mind in the back of your head. So anyway, so subject lines are related to open rates. Clicks in the body of your email are related to engagement. Did they engage with your content? And
Right.
again, whole other topic about email and what makes a good body of an email. But so you wouldn't test both. You wouldn't test both the subject line and contents, like two totally different emails. You wouldn't do that. This is also kind of a best practice, is just test one thing. Because if you test multiple things and one does much better than the other one, you don't know why. And so if you only do one thing, then great, you've learned that thing. So then you could apply, now that I've learned that this subject line resonates better with people, now I'm going to test the contents to see if I can improve the clicks that go to my website. So that might be what you would test for email. And even the layout of your, like, not just the call to action, like even that, there's like, do I change same content but different layout? Do I do different words but same layout? Like, again, try to just do one thing. So if your call to action button, just try to change one thing to try now, buy now, something like that. Simple test. And they probably drive to different destinations and probably have different goals. But
yeah. Well, and you mentioned two things too earlier about email that I wanted to touch on. You mentioned send times, and
yes,
not to completely solve that, but the idea could be that you take exactly the same email, like you're saying, you don't make any change to it. You split your list, and most likely people have some sort of control list as well in their email. They may have something like that set up if they do, but you could make sure that 50% of your audience, all segments, whatever, gets the email on Tuesday, and the other 50%, gets it on Thursday, or at 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. and run that over probably the course of some time, right? You probably shouldn't make a decision based on just one send.
Just keep doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Because testing requires multiple, what am I trying to say? Events in order to happen. And then you want lots of conversions to basically ensure that it's accurate, accurate prediction of what's going to happen in the future. The other thing I was going to mention, no, I think that was it.
So you had mentioned control, and for people that don't know, that's like, let's say you have something like your website. You have a page on your website, and you want to test some different things. The control is what you have today. It's like your current version of something. With email, though, I will say there's usually email platforms all have built in a way to test, and they all have built in the like, just send 50% of the traffic. Like, you don't have to split it out yourself. It just does it. And side note, best practice specific to email is you would send, it depends on how big your list is, because you do have to have enough volume for it to be statistically significant. But you might send a version to 20% of your list, and then another version to 20% of your list. And then after 6 hours or 12 hours or 24 hours, depending on which was better, again, what are you measuring, opens, or are you measuring clicks? Depending on which one's better, you then would push the remaining 60%. So by doing this, you're actually maximizing the amount of like the better result. Because if you just do 50-50, 50% and 50%, then you've potentially lost some people if it's the poorer version. So just keep that in mind. I think that's enough about email. Let's move on to advertising and what some of the things are that we might be able to measure there.
I think it's interesting because it's somewhat similar to email in that it could be the messaging, it could be the visual, right? It's less the subject line in the equivalent, let's say, is the headline or the message on the display ad, or whatever type of ad it is. It could be a paid social or I mean, sorry,
Ye-
paid search type of ad, which will mostly all be text. But
Yeah. Okay. Wait. So I got a couple thoughts here. So for social and for search, the tools themselves usually do the optimizing, which is technically testing for you. So
mm,
you write a bunch of headlines, you write a bunch of descriptions, you upload a bunch of images, and then the system, maybe not with search, but the system will mix and match and provide over time. It will adjust based on what people are clicking on, what people are doing.
mm-hmm,
On the display side, you also can do that if you wanted to. If you wanted to let Google or whoever create the ads for you, you basically go, here's some headlines, here's some images, here's the destination I want to take it to. And it creates it itself and it does the optimizing. Or if you're like, no, I've got a creative team or person, I can use Canva and I want to create all the different sizes. I want to specifically have the ad the way I want it. That too, it will, the more you kind of put out there, the more the system it stops showing the ones that don't run and it continues to show
that
ones
don't
that
get
do
clicked
run.
on. Yeah.
It'll put those aside. But then, so it's a different way of, you're still technically like testing. If you can just put a bunch of assets out there, it's
Mm-hmm.
like the system kind of shakes it out for you.
Right.
But in this particular scenario, you do have to continually add more creative because people get fatigue. If you're looking at the same ad over and over and over and over, you just are not, it's banner blindness. You don't see it after a
Mm-hmm.
while. So,
Well,
so as a brand, you have to create new assets.
so that's a really good point. Like in both email and advertising platforms, there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of testing built in. Like
Yes.
it's very simple. Like
There
there's
are,
nothing.
but there's still, I feel like there's still, it's happening, but you need to interpret the results of that. And I do want to give an anecdote. Back in the day when I was at Roku and responsible for the advertising there, I might have given this example before, but it's very relevant, which is we had banner ads that were, or sorry, like display ads that were product specific. So it was
Mm,
just literally like buy a Roku 3 or, streaming stick or whatever it is. We had ones that were customer quotes that we got from CNET, or sorry, customer quotes from like Twitter, X now.
reviews.
CNET quotes, reviews, exactly. So we did that as like a testimonial thing. We had what we called content, which, because as you know, we partnered with, say, HBO, Showtime, whoever, and we were able to use assets of theirs. And so we could say, watch Game of Thrones on Roku. And so we would
Right.
have like a Game of Thrones image. These were all approved by HBO. And so we had different themes and we just ran everything constantly. And then over time, we began to observe that different ads did better on different places. And
Mm-hmm.
so we would then create ads that were like, I would do more content ones that were for more upper funnel. I would do more product focused ones for people that were closer to making a decision. So we even had compare ads, like compare Roku to Amazon Stick or something like that.
Right.
So it depended on where people were, but it's like it was almost like a test where we were just sort of throwing a bunch of assets out there. And then we just sort of let the market figure out, like we just watched for a while and then we figured out what worked and then kind of were able to create things going forward. So sorry for
I
the long
think
story.
kind of keep us moving to that those two elements are ones where again it's more content testing, right? Or destination testing. When you think about a website,
Wait, before you move on, no. So that had to do with placements. So where we had ads on CBS, ESPN, Disney,
yeah.
Google, that size of the ads, destination of the ad. It had a lot of stuff, actually.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, did
Size.
you
That's
my
a thing to
question was
test.
going to be, or my comment was, when I think about A/B testing or any kind of testing strategy, it starts with a hypothesis. And so I think there's probably some hypothesis related to what you're going to test on email or what you're going to test in advertising, but some of the systematic testing may actually almost override your hypothesis. You're going to, like you said, you learn stuff just by watching stuff happen. You start with your
But
three buckets.
you still have to kind of have a hypothesis. So the the customer quotes and reviews was something that my manager at the time was the one that thought that would be a good idea, and she was right. Whereas because I had that experience, I've suggested that to other people to try, like,
Right.
hey, maybe this will help with your business. And sometimes it doesn't. So it's like, just because, so to me, that was almost like I don't
If it
know,
if it
maybe
works
this will
for it,
resonate. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. We don't know. So I feel like that's another it might not just be a hypothesis, which I guess that's what you were saying, but it might
yeah,
be
it's
more of
just
a like, yeah, it's just a starting point almost, or question to ask.
right because I think about while there are some automated tools, let's say for website testing, it's not as robust. It's really more you have to come up with your hypothesis, right?
Yeah,
You have
probably.
to say, like this is this landing page perform better than this page? Does this billboard on the homepage get click through? Which one?
Mm-hmm.
Based against, like we said earlier, our goal. If our goal is just click through,
Mm-hmm.
fine. Maybe our goal though is at the bottom of the funnel and it's 2 or 3 clicks away.
Yep.
So, and sometimes I think it's good to look at all of those steps, right, and measure effectively. One may be your sort of primary success metric, but you always have those secondary metrics to kind of validate some other aspects. But again,
Yeah.
headlines similar to advertising and email. I'm sorry, websites similar to advertising and email. You have headlines, you have layout, you have images, you have copy, things like that. So,
Yeah. So let's talk about the website though, because I think that website testing is a little different and you can get so specific about something. So maybe somebody has an opinion about, I don't like this. And it's kind of like, well, maybe we should test it. So what are we testing? Are we testing one image versus another image? Is it all those things we talked about? Is it the color of the button? Is it, there's a bunch of things that you can test. And with a website, you do need it to kind of run for a while. And it's a little bit trickier to set up website testing. Where we talked about the email and with advertising, it's not that hard to set up. Website's a little bit harder, and sometimes you need a third party to help you with it. Now, because Google used to have something that was like Google Optimize. It was something like that, but they decommissioned it, unfortunately.
yeah,
There is something called Optimizely, but I don't think that's cheap, is it? Yeah,
no.
and it's hard to implement. So okay, so then the other solution is you
But a
can
lot of the
create.
new, well, I
Yeah,
was going to say a lot of the newer website platforms have some
offer
testing
it.
built in or
Oh
will
well, that's
offer it
good.
as like a premium update. But
Okay, well
again,
that's
it's
good to
limited
know.
to their sort of
Right.
tool set and how their
Sure.
tools work. But
Well, so a hack that you could do is if you are looking to improve conversions on a landing page that is for advertising, you could literally create two different pages and 50% of your traffic goes to one and 50%
mm,
of traffic goes to another one. And that can get, you can just set that up almost like manually. It's two different campaigns that you would set up, but you would set it up so that they get served the same amount of times. Um, the clicks should be similar because theoretically it's the same placement, it's the same, everything should be the same. The only difference is the destination. So you can see the performance there, and you should let it run for a couple of weeks. And if you have enough traffic, 2 or 3 weeks is probably enough. But if not, you might need to let it run longer. And it's like you have to have enough conversions, whatever your thing is you're testing on your site. And it is, again, it's usually a conversion. You have to make sure you have enough. And I think it's usually like a couple hundred is a good number to aim for.
again,
I
there are
hear
some.
that. I heard a car driving by.
Oh, whoops, sorry. It's just a really loud truck. I
That's
was going to
crazy.
say that so there are calculators that will help you figure out what basically you have two factors, right? You have volume of impressions or number
Mm-hmm.
of times the page is visited or the ad is displayed or the email is available, whatever, the element
Mm-hmm.
in the email. And then you have your denominator, right? Which is the how many conversions or your metric
No, that's the
around.
numerator.
I'm sorry, numerator.
Conversions
Yeah,
is the numerator and the visits is the denominator to get you a rate because that
right.
matters.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, got that backwards. But
Yeah. Okay. And then we talked about the couple of things to test. Now this is a little too sophisticated, but at least we'll mention it. So there's something called multivariate testing, and that's with a platform that probably is more on the enterprise level, where it does kind of what Google and Meta do with ads. It does this to a website where you can say, mix and match my headlines and my images and my, like it'll just, it's called a one arm bandit, is the, look it up. But it'll mix and match things. So that's multivariate testing, because you're testing a bunch of things all at the same time. So it might give you like thousands of variations, and it's just running simulations.
And again, depending on the tool that you use to do that, some will, just like the ad scenario, they will start to not display, um, combinations that aren't effective, that aren't driving your goal metric.
Exactly.
I think the challenge with a lot of those platforms, and I'm thinking of like Test and Target and things like that,
Yeah.
they are very expensive, right? That's
Yeah,
not
exactly.
a single person, small business type of tool set.
Exactly.
It's something we should probably take a quick look at and see if we can, after the episode, identify any sort of less expensive or even free
Well,
testing.
one thing I thought of, and again, it's more of like a hack, like I talked about splitting traffic, is so we've talked about Unbounce and Intella something. Oh gosh, I can't remember. But basically, these are landing page creation tools, and so you can create different landing pages, and then you can do testing on that, and those might be $100 a month. Still not the super cheap, but it's and I think it's even less if if you don't care about what the URL is. But I would recommend having it be on your domain, so you need to spend a little bit more to have that happen. But it's like it has best practices for landing pages, and then from there you can even duplicate and start doing variations with testing with that. I always keep forgetting. It's like I'll remember one of them, and then I'll forget another one. But there's several of these. They're landing page, I don't know, creation tools.
Okay.
Anyway, all right. Well, let's move on. So, what are some common mistakes that people make? We kind of touched on some of them, but
Well, like you said, I testing too many things at once. Like you
yeah,
want to,
you're not going to learn.
yeah. You're not going to be able to determine what was the actual effective. That can even happen though. Again, if you try to go too deep with a success metric or whatever, right? Because people
What do you mean by that?
So, no matter if it's from email advertising or homepage, you might land on a page. And if your goal was conversion testing, but there's so many different options for someone to take in different paths, you're not really going to necessarily know like the optimal customer journey, if you will, through an A/B test, right? You're going to need to take a look at your data. I mean, there are other tools. They're not true testing tools, but tools that provide like heat mapping or recordings or user journeys can be really helpful at figuring out maybe where you need to test, where something is broken, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for clarification, user testing is a different kind of thing. And that's not what we're talking about. So just keep that in mind, because there are tools to help you with that. Like literally usertesting.com, I think, is one where you can get people in front of your.
I think, again, sometimes just to develop your your hypothesis for a true A/B test, you might want to look at some of these other factors.
Fair. Yeah,
right?
That's fair.
Because you might find something is broken so if you do a test across something that's already broken, you're not really going to learn from it. And you mentioned ending testing too early. I would just add to that I've seen it where the first week the test results are all over the place. There's just not enough normalization happening.
Exactly. So you got to throw that out, and then looking at a couple. Well, just it's too noisy. Ignore it, not throw it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the reason why it's like another 2 weeks is good, because there's like weekends and weekdays for one, and then you want to have it more than once, because if it's like that particular week had something crazy going on. So if you have it at least 3 weeks, it's good. So yeah. It's you.
That's probably one of the biggest hurdles that I've run into though is you want to, let's say you want to do a homepage test and you want to test different blocks of content. Like, is it a featured product? Is it, like you were saying earlier, is it a partner content? What goes at
Mhm.
the top? But if all of a sudden in the middle of that, there's the Black Friday sale, or I would never test
Yeah,
over
I
Black Friday
know. You have to do it
necessarily,
before.
or you test things that aren't going to materially maybe wreck your conversion rate, but that's a whole nother topic.
Mhm.
But I was thinking you might have a Mother's Day promo. You might have something come up that all of a sudden you need to lock those versions of your web page or
Mhm.
even your email
Mhm.
down for a certain amount of time, right?
Yeah, you don't want anything to change. Good
Yeah.
point. And then not documenting things. If you people have amnesia. It's, you don't remember. It's, you got to write down this is what it was before. What, you have a story?
Yes. Do
What?
you remember this
Okay.
story?
Well,
We
I
had a
can't read your
huge
mind.
debate. Is it 50% off or is it $50 off a $100 item?
Oh, I see. No, I don't
And
remember this. Oh,
and
so it's
no
something
one
that we
could
tested.
remember
Oh, that's
what
hilarious.
won last Christmas.
Yeah, right. Oh my God.
And so luckily we found data, but you don't really want to have it go that way. Like you said, much better to document
Ugh.
outcome. And again, I think we haven't really touched on it, but the notion of testing, while it can be easy and there's probably some simple things you can look at, you should have a notion of test charter, your different data points that you tested, screen grabs of what you changed, or add
Yeah.
pictures of your ad
Have a
or email,
record.
have a record, and then what happened, and
Hmm.
include Excel file or data table or whatever, so that you can go back and have this sort of portfolio or folio of test results.
You just made me think of another thing, which is, let's say you've started doing testing and you've been doing it for years now, and you're like, comes in that's new and they're like, oh, I want to test this thing. And you're like, we did that 5 years ago and it didn't work. Well, that's another thing, is like, things change.
Yep,
So it might be worth revisiting. So don't be so stringent on if something didn't work in the past that it's not going to work again.
I like
You need
that.
to have some flexibility around that.
Yeah,
Um,
especially if they came in and said, when we tested this. And again, everyone's environment is different, everyone's
yeah,
product is different, everyone's
yeah,
customer is different. But yeah, might be worth considering.
definitely.
Absolutely.
Well, then why don't we spin it the other way and say, what are some good habits or best practices that people should consider?
Well, we touched on it, documenting
Yeah, right. The
the whole
opposite of what
thing,
not to do. Yeah, true.
not
So
just
keeping,
outcomes.
yeah, so just keeping track of, right, what the tests are. Yeah, we had a pretty elaborate process at Adobe, but that's a bigger company. I think if you
Yeah.
just have something simple, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then if you have other people on your team, I do remember also if somebody would be like, what's this thing? And we're like, oh, it's a test. Like half the time I would say
Oh.
whiz back to that when I'm like, I don't know if I was completely honest about it, but that was always a good, and people would calm down, whatever it was. We're like, oh, we're just testing it.
But also,
But
if you
making
have good
sure,
results, making sure you share those too.
yeah, but communicating also upfront. Like we're running this test, so people are aware that
Right.
they're not like, is
Yep.
this broken? Yeah, so that they're aware you're running a test. So it's communication in general with whoever needs to know. And then I guess learning from past experiments is like, I always would almost like build upon. So even if we had hypotheses about something, we even would try to think through, if this wins, what will we do? If that wins, what will we do? So we've kind of tried to think through it a little bit, but
Yeah.
still sometimes you don't know what the outcome's going to be, and something very strange that you couldn't have possibly predicted might show up. And so maybe you build on that, say, oh, based on this, that surprised me, but you know what, now I'm wondering if we should test something else. So like you always build on stuff, build on what
Hmm.
you've learned, and kind of build from there. Anything else, or no?
No, I just said,
Okay.
I mean, be curious. Like when you see stuff, you can't test everything at once all the time. You don't want too many tests running at the same time, things like that. So start just keeping track of those ideas, things to test, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Curious
And
marketers are good marketers.
yeah, I think we should probably okay. So at some point we got to like summarize all of our like we've got some marketing tenets. Always be testing or always be measuring, always be curious. Maybe we'll try to
Yeah.
come up with a some sort of an acronym so that people can remember all the things that we think are important.
Cross-stick.
We are actually going to take listener questions, I think is going to be our next episode, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. And we will also reference some of the other episodes that we've already put out there that I think have been, we talked about email marketing funnel, attribution. Anything else before we sign off?
Nope. Well, from tangents to tactics.
It's mostly marketing.